Well, this story in the Sydney Morning Herald has blown my mind. It turns out the key ingredient that we've got in cold and flu tablets, and they're sold in, Woolies, Coles, chemists, and the key ingredient actually doesn't work. In fact, US scientists has found it's no better than a placebo. It's a big story. So the chemical is called phenylephrine. Phenylephrine. And it's what the big pharmaceutical companies have been using as a replacement for pseudoephedrine. So everything, your cold and flu tablets, you go to get this packet of Codrils or whatever. And, well, many years ago, I can't remember how long ago the ban came in, but, well, not the ban, but putting them behind the counter at chemists at least. And you'd buy a packet of Codrils and it'd have pseudoephedrine in them. But the pseudoephedrine, if bought in bulk, could be used to create speed and sold as an illicit substance. So what they did, now you need to provide your driver's license to get a packet of Codrils with pseudoephedrine in them. So the stuff that you buy from Coles and Woolies and your chemist just off the shelf now has phenylephrine in it. And according to these studies, the stuff doesn't work. Well, Associate Professor Nicola Smith is the head of pharmacology at the University of New South Wales, and she's on the line with a little more about this. Professor, thanks so much for your time.
Absolute pleasure, Chris. Great to join you.
Now, let's talk about phenylephrine. What is it exactly?
So phenylephrine is actually a fantastic drug, so let's not denigrate it too much here. Its role is to constrict blood vessels. So if you imagine when you've got a cold and you're all snotty, your blood vessels are really leaky, and that's where a lot of the gunk is coming from. So when you administer phenylephrine, those vessels tighten up, and so you don't get all of that leakiness, and that's what causes congestion. So phenylephrine is great, but it has to get to the site where the congestion is, and this is where the problem is. So nasal sprays are great, but these guys are giving it to us in cold and flu tablets. And the phenylephrine doesn't actually get to your nose.
How long's this been going for?
So the problem is that the evidence has been a bit controversial, or not particularly controversial, contradictory. I feel like it's a bit of an open secret. A lot of people I know say, oh, I don't bother with the cold and flu tablets, or I buy them just for the nighttime ones because they have an antihistamine in them. That's sedating antihistamine. So when you're feeling pretty rubbish, if you have one of those, it helps you sleep at night, even when you're feeling congested. And, of course, the other reason you take the cold and flu tablets and you feel that they're working is because they're full of paracetamol.
Mm.
So you're paying a lot more money for something that you could just, by taking some paracetamol, get an effect and using a nose spray. So the problem with the previous advice from the FDA in America was that they were using methods for measuring the amount of phenylephrine that gets into the bloodstream that were outdated and were indirect. So we think that they were quite a significant overestimate. So back then they were going off 38% getting into the blood. So we can handle that, but actually, with more sensitive techniques, we now know that it's less than 1% gets in the blood. So that's why it's the same as placebo, because it's not getting anywhere near the site where we need it to.
So you're telling me over I don't know how long pseudoephedrine how long ago it went behind the counter at a chemist. So you're telling me I lob up at the Coles or Woolies, your supermarket, and I'm feeling pretty ordinary, and I buy a packet of Codril or Sudafed, whatever it is, and it's got this phenylephrine in it, and I take it, and I may as well just be taking Panadol.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
I'd be paying 10 times more for the cold and flu tablets.
Yes, and the cynic in all of us would think that that's probably very clever marketing.
Or a rort.
Wouldn't we? Yeah, so, and there's so many different formulations of them as well. You know, each of these cold and flu tablets tells you it's going to solve a different problem, but it's not. And the problem is we feel so terrible when we have a cold. and you just want to relieve the symptoms because you're miserable. For a very short period of time, you're utterly miserable and you want it to go away. So you think, oh, if I pay for this expensive, well-advertised, you've got brand recognition and confidence in the brand, then that will help me feel better. And it does because it's got paracetamol, but it's not because of this phenylephrine.
So it's not dangerous, is it, to digest it orally?
No, well, it's definitely not dangerous because it's not going anywhere. It's getting broken down. But so the reason why the advisory committee has told the FDA that they recommend the FDA re-examine the classification of phenylephrine, oral phenylephrine, is because they have a metric by which they judge drugs, and they say, well, is it having an effect and is it safe? And so phenylephrine's safe to take orally, because it's not really there anymore once it gets to the stomach. But there are going to be risks. So anytime you're taking something, particularly that you don't need, you're still exposing yourself to, say, the risks of an allergic reaction, or there might be some combined effects with other drugs that you're taking. So it's not particularly advisable, but it's not something we need to rip off the shelves. I think it's a really valuable message to get out there that if it's okay, according to your doctor, for you to take pseudoephedrine, just present to the chemist and show them your driver's license and say, I'd like the pseudoephedrine, and then at the same time take the paracetamol and just snuggle up under the doona.
Because the pseudoephedrine, there's no doubt in the world that works. That's the grouse, that stuff.
It's awesome. Yeah. I always say, when I first met my husband, I said to him, oh, mate, you've got to go straight behind the counter. And he thought he was still getting it because he didn't realise the change, because they didn't change the packaging, they didn't change the marketing. There was no obvious difference. They just swapped out the ingredients because of the changes in the legislation regarding pseudoephedrine.
Professor...
so it's natural people didn't realise.
Of course. I really appreciate that. I've really enjoyed this chat, and thank you. It's been very, very enlightening, because you just never know, do you? You trust them, but you never quite know.
Hopefully you save some money.
Absolutely. Professor Nicola Smith from the University of New South Wales. She's the head of pharmacology. There you go. Just take some bog standard paracetamol when you're crook. Go get one of the phenylephrine nasal sprays, or ask for the stuff behind the counter if you feel really ordinary. Pseudoephedrine. The stuff that you buy at Coles and Woolies. Waste of money, waste of time.